Today, we're going to be talking about installing hardware. So this house that we're installing hardware in this week has many different types of hardware. Here's a few of them. We've got these are going in butler pantry and kitchen. We have these that are going in the master bath. We have some of these that are going in the bar area. This hardware right here is going to go in this little guest bath. So we're going to go through the process of how to measure, mark, drill, and install this hardware using a couple of different methods. So the first thing is terminology. If there are two holes, we call that a pull typically, or a handle. If it is one hole, like this one, that is a knob. This we would call a T-knob because it looks like a T. And this, I guess that would be a very big T-knob. Sometimes you have odd hardware like this where you'd want to call it a handle, but we could argue about terminology. But that's basically it. Knobs and pulls. So in this bathroom, we have all pulls. These are more contemporary. They're square. Contemporary style usually has a lot of square, clean lines. Most everything in this house is contemporary. So there's two things that we have. Screws. There are two different types of screws that we use mainly. There are standard and metric. The standard screw is an 832. The metric is an M4 by 0.07. I don't know what 0.07 stands for. I think that's threads. But anyway, if you look at these screws, and I don't know if you can get like a super duper close up of those, but if you look at the one on the right, it's a little bit smaller and the threads are closer together. That's the metric screw. So if you're trying to figure out what's what, you can look at, compare two together, whichever one's the smaller one with more threads closer together, that's going to be your metric screw. You can also tell by how they screw into the handle. So these handles that are going in this bathroom are metric. It just screws in super easy. The handles, if you try to put in this M32, or excuse me, 832, it's just not even gonna go in there. And if you try to put, it's gonna get bound up. And if you try to put a metric in a 832, you start screwing it in and it's gonna get stuck after a couple of threads. So the reason that that's important is you want to make sure that you are using the proper screw, that it screws in easily, and you're not trying to jam a screw into a hole that it doesn't fit. There's also, these are called a cutoff screw. So there's different sections right here that you can use a pair of lineman's pliers and you can clip these screws at these points. If you just cut this screw right here in half, it's gonna pinch those threads together and you won't be able to screw the screw into the hole in the handle. So they create these break-off screws that you can cut at these specific points where there's no threads, and then that way you can screw it into the handle and there's no threads to booger up. Okay, so we're gonna use the cutoff screws to install the handle, and if we insert them, you can see that the nearest cutoff point is right here. If we cut it off this close, there's barely any threads coming out, and that's just not gonna catch that handle enough right there. So what we'll do is take our lineman pliers, go on the second, clip, and clip. Now some handles will not allow you to insert this much thread into the pull. So we will test it to make sure that the thread will be inserted all the way past that next cutoff point before it bottoms out. Right there is where it bottoms out. If the threads are too long and you try to screw that handle on, especially on these break-off screws, that's a weak point. So you can easily snap a screw inside of there. So just make sure that your screw is not too long. If it was too long, we would probably have to cut it back at this one and then countersink the back of this drawer a little bit, so this screw head could recess in to give us more thread on this side. So we set the chuck on our number 3. Start one side, don't tighten it all the way. Tighten that side all the way, and go back and snug that side up. And that is it. So I want to show in this area how to use these type of pliers. This has, see that says 832 right there. So this is how you clip an 832 screw if it does not have cutoffs. So we want to check the length of this long screw, and we need to take about 1/4 inch off of it. So you have to screw this in. It's threaded, and then you got to make sure that it's kind of lined up on the back side so that it comes out there. And because this is about almost an 1/8 inch thick, we'll stick about an 1/8 out the back side right here, because it's going to cut, the place that it cuts is right here at the joint. So just clip that, and then you unscrew it. Sometimes it's easier with a drill because when you cut it, it can kind of bend the thread around, but as you unscrew it, it straightens the thread back out. And then put this in. And here's another thing to note as well. A lot of times these T-knobs, or a knob that matters which direction that it sits, has little studs on the back right there. And those studs will dig into the face of the wood to keep that knob from spinning. If they weren't there, it makes it really easy to have that knob turn once you get it tightened up. So we'll just snug this down. Maybe we'll snug it down. So before we tighten it all the way, we'll make sure that it is running in line on that drawer front. And a lot of times you'll have to kind of, your drill's turning this way, and so it's wanting to turn the knob, so you kind of got to keep some pressure down on it. Snug that up. Yep. That one will kind of throw you off because of the way that these pieces are slanted. It looks crooked, but it's pretty straight. Okay, so now we will go through the steps of how to measure out manually the location of the center of these holes on this piece of hardware on this door. So on this vanity, we have a door here and a door on this side and a single drawer in the center that we're putting the hardware on. Now, typically, if the handle is flat and square, I will line up the top of the handle with this line right here in the door. So just like that right there. So that line carries across flush with the top of that. Now that's how I typically do it, but we never drill anything without confirming with a designer or homeowner or builder, somebody, to make sure that we're putting it in the location that they want. If you look at this sheet of paper right here, this is what Graham's, who supplied the hardware, gave us. It tells us what hardware goes where. So this is an 8 13/16 inch center to center pull goes on this drawer, and then the 5 16 inch pulls go on these two doors. But it doesn't tell us exactly where they want the hardware positioned on the door. Drawers are typically going to be centered both ways, but some bigger drawers will actually set the hardware up a little bit higher. So it's always good to confirm. Now, in here, we confirm with the designer that she does like this line flush with the top of the pull right there. So when marking the hardware, we want to mark the center of the holes where the screws are going to go in. So we'll double check the width. I'll hold it on 1 inch and hold it down here. That is 6 1/16, and so we subtract that inch, making it 5 1/16 is the center to center of that pole. Now, for the first hole location, we measure from the top of the door to the edge of this, which is 2 1/16 plus. Then we need to add the distance from the top of this pole to the center of the hole. So if we put that on 2 1/16 plus, and then we look at where that line hits the center is 2 5/16. All right. So 2 5/16 right here. And then you can either do the math, we can add 5 1/16 to this measurement and pull down and make a mark, or I can just hold my tape measure at 2 5/16 and then look down here at the bottom hole, that's 7 3/8. So that, we always want to eliminate math as much as possible. So 7 3/8. Now, this handle, we want to center it left and right on the flat spot on this door. So we'll measure the width from here to here is also 2 1/16 plus. So half of 2 1/16 plus is 1 1/16 cool. Cool is just a hair under a 16th. That's like minus a 64th. So 1 1/16 cool there, and 1 1/16 cool there. Now see, my lines are a little bit off. I'll go ahead and just connect that line across. And that crosshair is where I will drill the hole for the door. Now, important step, especially if you are measuring out handles manually, is before you drill the holes, take the handle that's going to go on there and just stick it on the door. Make sure you didn't do any math wrong. So we're lined up here, we're lined up here. We know that's going to be good to go. Drilling a hole wrong in a finished door at the end of a project, never fun. So we always want to double check. Now, moving on to the handle for the door, for the drawer. I'm going to go through 3 methods of doing this. Three methods. See, this is why we don't want to do math, because even I can't count. So, the first method, we'll lay it out manually, then I'll show how you can use a stick to make that a little easier, and then we'll use this True Position Tools jig that makes things even easier. So the first thing we want to do is check the width center to center of the holes on here. So we hold it on 1 inch. That's 9 13/16. So that's a 8 13/16 center to center. It does say that here on the drawings, and it does say it on the hardware package, but I never trust it. Always double check. Don't ever drill something if somebody's like, hey, just drill this. This is how wide the center to center hole are on this hardware. Man, sometimes they're a 16th off. Sometimes the hardware is handmade and it varies. Just always double check it. So 8 13/16 is our center to center. Now, we want to make this handle center in this drawer front. So in order to do that, we will measure over 8 13/16 from one edge and make a little tick mark. Now, we want this much space to be centered in the drawer. So what we'll do is we'll measure the remaining side, pull from the other side of the drawer, 17 13/16. All right? So now we want to divide 17 13/16 by 2, because we want half of this space on this side of the handle and half of this space on the other side of the handle. So 17 13/16 divided by 2 is going to be 8 7/8 plus. That's that mark. This is our original handle mark. That's the actual side, how much we need to be off the side, so that's super close. And it just happened to work out like that. That's not how it normally is. So 8 7/8 plus, then we will make it 8 7/8 plus on this side. Thing's buzzing on my neck. All right, so then vertically, we want to be half of 6 1/4 because we want to center it. Half of 6 1/4 is 3 1/8. All right, Mark. We'll erase this one because that was our original tick. So now take our handle and we double check, and that lines up. So that is good to go. Now we'll talk about the second method. Okay, so our second method is using a shim to make a little jig. The easiest way to do that, take your handle, lay it on said shim, or you can use any kind of stick of wood or a piece of cardboard, anything. Mark the center of your holes right here. And then you want to transfer those marks straight across the top, like this. So you have a mark all the way around the other side. Okay, now we want to make a mark that is at the center of those two marks. So we know we are 8 13/16. We need to divide that by 2, so that's going to be 4 3/8 plus, holding 1 inch, 5 3/8 plus. Double check this side on 1 inch should be 5 3/8 plus, and indeed it is. So then we will mark that right here. Now the purpose of this is to eliminate this step. If you have a lot of one size handle and you got a lot of different size drawers, that whole step that we just did about having to measure off the side of the drawer, make a mark, measure from the other side, divide that by 2, take that, put it over here, measure off the other side. You got to do that every time your drawer size changes. You got to redo all that math. This way, all you have to do is find the center of each drawer. So it makes it a little bit easier. So this whole drawer is 26 5/8 wide. Half of 26 5/8 is 13 5/16. We always double check our center. Go this way, 13 5/16. Now, we just take this, line up the center mark on that mark, and then make a vertical tick there and there. Now you still have to measure the height manually, but what that does is that eliminates some math, and you always know that you're centered up and that your width is correct. And then you erase your center pencil mark. So that's good to go. So that is the second method. It's using a jig to make manual marking a little bit faster. All right, the third method that we're going to use of marking this drawer and also this door is to use this jig. This jig is a True Positions Tools jig, and it's pretty nifty once you learn how to use it. So there's a center mark, and there's equal inch measurements and millimeter measurements off the side of the center each direction. So first, what we want to do is set the width of our handle on here. So you have to know the width and you have to divide it by 2. We just did that math a minute ago. It was 4 and what was that? 4 3/8 plus. So we set the jig to 4 3/8 plus on the right, and to 4 3/8 plus on the left. Now, double check, because man, you get this set up wrong and you drill a bunch of them, that's no good, because then you mess up a ton of stuff. So see how that is right lined up on that center line? This side is not quite lined up. So that means that the whole thing needs to be a little bit wider So that's why you always just double check it. My plus, I didn't do enough of a plus on this side. On this side. See, it's stuff like this while I'm messing with stuff, you can kind of just cut that out. You can just go to this and be like, oh, it lines up. All right, so this, we're lined up on our marks. So we know that that's good to go. Now, we know that this drawer front is 6 1/4 inches tall. The dimensions right here are from the center of this hole up. So if our drawer front's 6 1/4, the center of the drawer front will be at 3 1/8. So we set the bottom of this plate to 3 1/8. So now all we have to do is just hook that on there like that, and then drill our 2 holes. So the only thing you have to do, the steps that this eliminates is you don't have to find your vertical measurement. All you have to do is make a center mark on the top of each drawer that you want to drill. So we had figured earlier that this was 13 5/16. You make that center mark right on the top and a little bit down the back. There's a little notch in the top of this that you line up right there so that it is lined up in that little notch is center of this whole jig. Now, use this bit, hold so it doesn't move. See, it's kind of got a little bit of play in it, so you got to be careful. All right, that's one side. Make sure we're still on our mark and that the jig didn't shift. And then we do the other side. All right, that's that. Now, don't forget to erase your pencil mark on top. All right, now we're going to show how to set this jig up for drilling the hole for this door. Now, we've already done our math for this side, so it's going to make it a little bit easier. We don't have to go through all that again. But basically, we know that from the edge of the door in, we were 1 1/16 cool. So we'll set this plate at 1 1/16 cool. That sets our center measurement. Then, there's a couple of ways you can do this. So we know that our handle is 5 1/16 wide, and half of that is 2 1/2 plus. So we'll set this at 2 1/2 plus. We'll set this at 2 1/2 plus. Take our handle, line it up on our marks. That's good. All right. Now this is a stop on the end. So this will slide on, got that backwards, like so. And we want to set from the center of this to the edge of this to be 2 5/16, because that was our dimension from the top of the drawer to the center of the hole on this side. So we would have had to do that math if we hadn't done it already, but we can set, so I just put my tape measure on the end of this and slide that down till I'm at 2 5/16. Right there, tighten this little set screw. Make sure it's good and snug, because yesterday I was drilling some holes with this and it moved on me and I didn't realize it. Thankfully we were able to save everything, but that can be really bad. So double check after you tighten it that that's 2 5/16. Now, sometimes what I'll do, especially in this case because I've already marked this side, I'll mark out one door just to make sure that everything lines up. And I will hook that on there, and you can look in these holes and you can see that our holes that our little tick marks, crosshairs that we marked, are center on those holes right now. So that's good to go. Now, the beauty of this is it takes a couple minutes to get it set up, but once it's set up, if you have a bunch of hardware, man, you can roll through a lot of hardware because you don't have to mark it and then drill it. So we'll put our jig on here, touching at the top, pushing it on the side, and it's reversible, so you can go either way. And then drill this right here. All right. Now, something to keep in mind, this bit is pretty sharp, and so we don't really have trouble with it. But see how it kind of blows out the back just a little bit? When this bit punches through, you notice how I was pulling out the drill kind of in and out. That helps clean the bit off, so I'm not having to push so hard. You don't want to just cram it through there because it can blow the back of that door out. One thing that we do to avoid that is use a tapered bit. So this is a countersink bit that we use all the time, and I've taken the countersink portion off of it. But because that bit is tapered and comes to a point, it won't blow the back out. So I'm gonna drill this door with this bit. If we're ever drilling without the jig, I always use this bit. And that is simply because it does not blow the back of the door out as much. Now, I'm also opening the door to make sure that I'm not going to accidentally punch the side of the cabinet when I go through. So this one likes to smoke a lot, but it's all right. So this one it will go through. It doesn't want to blow it out, and any little fuzzies that are around the edge will be covered by the head of the screw. All right, that's Hardware 101. Good luck. It's sitting right here. I don't know if it was.
What?
I said there's my apple in the picture.